In November 1978, more than 900 people drank from a vat of poison punch, and most of them did it willingly. They weren't insane. They weren't stupid. Many were doctors, teachers, parents who loved their children deeply. So what turned ordinary, intelligent human beings into people capable of this? The answer isn't found in their personalities. It's found in something far more uncomfortable, the same hidden forces that are quietly shaping your decisions right now, today, without you ever noticing. Why do smart people believe things that aren't true? Why do kind people sometimes do cruel things? And why does the group around you have more power over your mind than you'd ever admit? One man spent his entire career answering these questions. His name was Elliot Aronson, and what he discovered will change the way you see yourself and everyone around you, forever. Elliot Aronson grew up in a tough, working-class neighborhood in Massachusetts, the kind of place where being the only Jewish kid on the block meant getting chased home from school more afternoons than not. As a boy, sitting on the curb after another rough day, he didn't ask, "Why me?" He asked something more useful. Why do people dislike people they've never even talked to? That question followed him into college, where, chasing a girl he liked into the wrong lecture hall, he wandered into an introductory psychology class. The professor was talking about prejudice. Aronson sat there stunned. Somebody had turned his childhood question into an entire science. He changed his major that same day. He went on to study under Leon Festinger, one of the most important social psychologists of the 20th century, and Aronson would later take Festinger's most famous idea and refine it into something even more powerful. You're about to understand that idea better than almost anyone you know. Over the decades that followed, Aronson became the only psychologist in the 125-year history of the American Psychological Association to win all three of its highest honors, for research, for teaching, and for writing. But his biggest achievement wasn't a prize. It was a book. First published in 1972, The Social Animal has been revised and updated again and again, edition after edition, because Aronson refused to let it go stale. Millions of students have used it as their first doorway into psychology, not because it's full of jargon, but because it tells the truth about human nature in a way that feels like someone finally explaining you to yourself. So what exactly is social psychology? It isn't about labeling people as crazy or evil. Aronson built his entire book around one radical idea, something that has come to be known as Aronson's first law. People who do crazy things are not necessarily crazy. Read that again. The crowd that watches a stranger get hurt and does nothing. The smart, educated adult who hands over their savings to a cult. Aronson's argument is that we make a dangerous mistake when we explain these things by saying, that person must be broken. Because the truth is far scarier and far more useful. Most extreme human behavior isn't caused by extreme personalities. It's caused by ordinary people dropped into extraordinary situations. Change the situation, the social pressure, the group, the authority figure in the room, and you can turn almost anyone into someone they wouldn't recognize. That's what social psychology studies, not what's wrong with people, but what's happening around them. And once you understand that, you can never again watch the news the same way. Picture this. You're sitting in a room with 7 other people. Everyone is shown 2 simple cards, one with a single line, the other with 3 lines of clearly different lengths. All you have to do is say out loud which of the 3 lines matches the first one. It's not a trick question. It's not even hard. A child could get it right every single time. But here's the twist. The other 7 people in the room aren't really participants. They're actors. And one by one, they all confidently give the same wrong answer. Now it's your turn. Do you trust your own eyes, or do you go along with the group? About a third of the time, people abandon the obvious truth sitting right in front of their eyes, just to match what everyone else was saying. Not because they were stupid, because the pull to belong, to not be the odd one out, is one of the strongest forces in human behavior. And here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. This wasn't a one-time fluke in a lab. The same pressure shows up in your group chat, your office meeting, your family dinner table, Anywhere a group has already decided on an answer before you've had the chance to think for yourself. Here's something uncomfortable about your own brain. It is lazy in the most efficient way possible. Aronson explains that we don't process the world like a careful scientist, weighing every fact. We process it like a busy person trying to get through the day, using shortcuts, snap judgments, and first impressions to make sense of an overwhelming amount of information. This is why a single piece of information you learn about someone in the first few seconds can color everything you think about them afterward, even if it isn't fair, and even if it isn't true. It's also why two people can watch the exact same event and walk away with completely different memories of what happened, because the brain doesn't record reality. It edits it, fills in gaps, and quietly rewrites the story to make it make sense. This single insight explains arguments between couples, disputes between coworkers, and even courtroom testimony that turns out to be unreliable. Now we arrive at the idea Elliot Aronson is most famous for, the one his mentor Leon Festinger first discovered, and that Aronson spent his career refining. It's called cognitive dissonance. Here's the simple version. Whenever two things you believe, or a belief and an action, clash with each other, it creates a kind of mental discomfort. And your mind hates that discomfort so much, it will do almost anything to make it disappear. Not by changing your behavior. Usually by changing your beliefs instead. In one classic study described in the book, people were paid to tell a lie, to say a boring task was actually fascinating. Some were paid a large sum of money. Others were paid almost nothing. Logic says the people paid more would feel less guilty about lying, since they had a bigger excuse. But the opposite happened. The people paid almost nothing started to actually believe the task was interesting. Why? Because they didn't have a good enough external reason for lying, so their brain manufactured an internal one. I wouldn't lie for almost no money, so it must not have been a lie. I must have actually enjoyed it. This single mechanism, self-justification, explains an enormous amount of human behavior. It's why people stay in relationships, jobs, and beliefs that clearly aren't working, instead of walking away and admitting the mistake. It's also why the more effort or pain something costs us, the more we end up valuing it. Aronson's own research found that people who went through a harsh, embarrassing initiation to join a group ended up liking that group more than people who got in easily. The discomfort had to be justified somehow, so the mind decided the group must be worth it. And it's why, once a person makes a difficult decision, they almost immediately start convincing themselves it was the right one, even rewriting how they remember the choice itself. If self-justification explains how we fool ourselves, this next part explains how other people influence us, sometimes with our full cooperation. Aronson dedicates a major part of the book to the science of persuasion, the techniques propagandists, advertisers, politicians, and salespeople use to change what we think, often without us even realizing it's happening. One finding stands out. If you're trying to persuade an audience that already knows the topic well, presenting only your side of the argument actually backfires. They notice what you left out and trust you less. But if you present both sides and then explain why your side wins, you come across as more honest and you're more persuasive. For audiences who don't know much about the topic, though, a simple one-sided argument works better. They don't have the context to weigh two sides anyway. Here's an even stranger trick from the book. You can actually vaccinate people against persuasion. By exposing someone to a weak version of an argument first, one they can easily knock down, you build up their mental resistance so the strong version doesn't work nearly as well later. Aronson called this inoculation, borrowed directly from how vaccines work in your body. And then there's a sales tactic called lowballing, which the book exposes in detail. A salesperson offers you a fantastic deal. You agree to it. Mentally, you've already decided. Then, suddenly, the price quietly goes up. Logically, you should walk away. But because you've already committed in your own mind, most people stay anyway, finding ways to justify the new, worse price. Once you see this pattern, you'll start noticing it everywhere. In negotiations, in contracts, even in relationships. Now let's talk about something every parent, teacher, and human being wonders about. Where does aggression actually come from? For decades, a popular idea claimed that aggression builds up like steam in a kettle, and the healthiest thing you can do is let it out. Punch a pillow, scream, watch something violent to blow off steam. Aronson's book takes this idea apart. The research he cites tells a very different story. Acting aggressively doesn't relieve aggression, it rehearses it. In one well-known study described in the book, children who watched an adult demonstrate energetic, rough play with an inflatable toy were far more likely to copy that same physical behavior themselves, almost exactly, when given the chance. Aggression, in other words, isn't a pressure valve. It's a habit, and like any habit, the more you practice it, the more natural it becomes. So if punching a pillow doesn't work, what does? Aronson's answer is almost the opposite of what most people expect. Instead of expressing anger outward, the more effective path is often building empathy, genuinely understanding the perspective of the person you're angry at, which makes the aggression harder to justify in the first place. This next part of the book isn't just Aronson reporting on someone else's research. This is the part where he became the researcher who changed real classrooms. In the early 1970s, schools in parts of the United States were newly desegregated, and tension between groups of students was high. Aronson was asked to help. He noticed something important. Prejudice doesn't usually come from one group simply disliking another. Often, it comes from competition, groups fighting over the same limited resources, the same approval, the same spotlight. So Aronson designed something simple but brilliant. He broke classroom lessons into pieces, like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle, and gave each student in a small group only one piece of the information needed for the whole assignment. To succeed, students from different backgrounds had no choice but to depend on each other, listen to each other, and value what each person brought to the table. The results were striking. Prejudice between groups dropped. Self-esteem went up, especially for students who had been struggling. And the technique, now known worldwide as the jigsaw classroom, is still used in schools today, decades later. Aronson's discovery wasn't just academic. It was proof that prejudice isn't fixed. It's a product of the situation people are placed in, and if you change the structure of that situation from competition to genuine cooperation, you can change the prejudice itself. Finally, Aronson turns to a question every single person has wondered about at some point. Why do we like the people we like? You'd think the answer is simple. We like people who are flawless, impressive, perfect. But the book reveals something almost backwards. In one of Aronson's own studies, people listen to a recording of someone giving brilliant, confident answers to questions. Then, in one version, that same impressive person clumsily knocked over a cup of coffee at the end. You'd expect that mistake to make people like the person less. Instead, it made them like the person more. Aronson called this the pratfall effect. A small blunder makes a highly competent person seem more human, more relatable, but only if they were already seen as competent to begin with. The book also explores the mere exposure effect. Simply being around someone repeatedly, even without deep interaction, tends to increase how much we like them. Familiarity itself breeds warmth, not contempt, in most ordinary situations. And similarity matters more than almost anything else. We are drawn again and again to people who share our values, our backgrounds, our sense of humor, not because opposites attract, but because sameness reassures us that we've made a good choice in trusting someone. Even praise and favors, Aronson found, don't work the way you'd assume. Compliments and kindness only increase liking when they feel genuine. The moment someone suspects they're being flattered for a reason, the whole effect can reverse. So after all of this, the conformity, the self-justification, the persuasion, the aggression, the prejudice, the attraction, what's the one idea that ties the social animal together? It's this: you are far less in control of your own mind than you believe, and far more capable of change than you believe. The same forces that can make a good person do something terrible can also be used, deliberately, to make a divided classroom cooperate, to make a stubborn mind reconsider, to make a stranger feel like family. Aronson's life work wasn't about proving that human beings are weak or easily fooled. It was about proving that once you understand the invisible forces shaping your behavior, You stop being a passenger inside your own life, and you finally start driving. The next time you feel completely certain about something, a belief, a decision, a person you've judged in an instant, pause for just a second. Ask yourself the question Elliot Aronson spent his whole career asking. Is this really what I think? Or is this what the situation around me has quietly talked me into? That single question might be the most powerful tool the social animal has to offer. If this breakdown helped you see yourself a little more clearly, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, and stay curious. Because understanding other people always starts with understanding yourself.